And now it's all green again. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to EPAM. Again, sorry, technical support. Welcome to the EPAM offices today. Thank you for being here. We have a couple of stellar presenters ready to present their really cool stories for you. If there's any questions about EPAM, what we do, who I am, all of that, feel free to hit us up during the breaks or after the talks. Would love to tell you more. Oh, and I forgot to do this part again because the tech support stuff went out. I'm Mike Beerman. I'm the head of the Azure department for EPAM in the Benelux region. And amongst others, Jeff is one of the guys from my team who will have awesome stuff to say on the stuff that we do in Azure. Thank you for being here. I don't want to take up more time with broadcasting, advertising for EPAM, so enjoy tonight, and again, if you want to know anything, feel free to hit me up afterwards. Enjoy the show.
Nothing makes it a techie evening if we don't have any tech issues. So, let's have a look. See if we can play around. There we go. So. Yeah, okay, how about that? So, welcome everyone. Mike, thanks for the introduction. Always fun to also have some technical difficulties to make it more fun. Welcome to my session, guys, and ladies, gentlemen, and like the title says, we're going to talk about pipelines, and I'm going to explain why I might be in your pipelines and reading all your secrets. So, be ready for that. My name is Jeff. I'm a cloud consultant. I do architecture, automation, and security. I mostly combine automation and security with a nice umbrella called architecture. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. I do sometimes some blogging, some videos, and you can find me on Twitter as well. So, today's goal. Well, we're going to learn how secured or marked as secret variables are handled during pipeline runtime. So, when we execute a pipeline and we have some variables and secrets, we're going to learn how these are handled and how they can be potentially abused. So, and of course, we're going to get some basic understanding on how to do some countermeasures, because one thing is to understand how it's happening. It's much more fun to see how we can prevent it. So, why am I doing this session? Well, in my opinion, security is everybody's responsibility. It's no longer just the security team. They're going to hate you for it. And primarily, I want to turn this beautiful DevOps unicorn, pooping rainbow, and poor sec guy trying to shovel, in this case, very pretty smelling, but still shit, into this. So hopefully this presentation will add some value into the happy security guy riding his unicorn into the sunset. So a quick recap before we start. So for ladies and gentlemen, or those who use Azure DevOps know that we have about 5 places where we can store variables. We have the inline variables. Those are stored directly in the YAML files. Not much to break there. You get the YAML file, you get the value, whether it's a secret or not. Queue-time variables, you set those during configuration. Queue, again, nothing there. You set it yourself when you queue the pipeline. Next one is pipeline variables. These can be set when you create the pipeline. If you don't have access to the pipeline, you are probably not going to get access to these. So we're going to skip this for these as well. I'm going to focus on the last 2. We're going to focus on variables in the form of secret and in the form of regular variables in library groups. And the second one is a variation on those library groups. Those are key vault linked variables. A lot of people have the assumption if we link a variable group to a key vault, it must be more secure. We're going to figure out whether that's true or not. So let's start with the setup to explain a bit, because I'm actually going to do a demo in a second. And hopefully it will crash and burn like we just did with technical problems. So otherwise it won't be fun. So I have an Azure DevOps organization called DemoJeff. Very, very, very interesting name. Every organization wants that URL, but it's mine. It's called MyShuttle. It's one of the actually standard Azure DevOps templates that you can get from Microsoft. They actually have this one pre-generated with some code, etc. So it will look very real. Everything you see there, it's not. So you can make pictures of the secrets. You're going to break into my demo environment. So good luck. So what do we have? We have Hank, who's sitting actually over there, but he's going to be virtually helping me. And he's a project contributor, developer, engineer, any kind of that role. And we have Jeff Admin, who's the project administrator. So this project has a couple of basically pipelines, code repos, and on top of that I have created 3 variable groups. A regular one, I do test group. Everybody, as you can see from the green arrows, both Hank and the admin have access to that one. And then we have 2 more variables that Hank doesn't have access to, which is the variable group for a key vault and a demo variable. I'll show you in a second. And then we're going to see if we can actually first get those variables and actually read the ones that are secret. So that's the goal for today. So, demo time. So, let's open up and drag it there. I actually would need to turn myself a little bit. So, this is MyShuttle logged in as myself. Yeah, I'll try to zoom in and see if it's going to be a bit more readable. That's too much, I guess. So, this is the MyShuttle project. I'm logged in right now as Jeff. Yes, there we go. I'm going to move a little bit. Make it a little bit more easy to read for myself as well. So, and as you can see, we have a project, a repo, we have some pipelines, and we can see if we look at all the pipelines, we're going to focus on this demo on the pipeline secrets. So we have 1, 2, and if we get enough time, there's actually a fun bonus that we can look at. So this is the repository, this is the setup that I just showed you in a PowerPoint and through an administrator. On top of that, let's see, we have, there we go, a Hank, and Hank can only see, again, the repo, and if I did it correctly, he should be able to see only one pipeline, hopefully. If I screwed up. No, I screwed it up. Okay. Yeah, no, the pipelines is correct, sorry. He can see all the pipelines, and then we have the library variables, and we can see that he only has access to 1. And if we go back to whatever it is, there we go. The actual admin, we have the 3 variables, right? So Hank should be able to only access the top one and see it. So imagine Hank's profile gets compromised. The assumption here is that with this configuration, that only whatever is here, whatever Hank has access to actually, gets compromised. So let's have a look. And again, They're fake URLs, fake SAS tokens, everything. So what actually happens is we, as Henk, can create a pipeline to get access list. There we go. I'm not sure if I can zoom in on this one. Sorry? Let's see. Can we zoom in? Yes, thank you. So what happens here? We're going to create a pipeline to first get all the list all the variable groups, and we can do that by actually calling the web API from Azure DevOps. So if you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm creating, first I'm getting a system access token. I'll tell you in a second what that is. You're going to find out. Encode it, create a header, and then call the standard my shuttle. And again, here's hard-coded, but you can create variables around this to actually iterate through multiple of these. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get variable groups with the group name star. So I'm going to list all of them. Let's see if I can maybe mirror, duplicate. That might make my life a lot easier. So, yeah, that's much more fun. So this is the first piece of code. This piece of code, let's see, get all group variables. Zoom in, yes. Is this readable? Yeah, cool. So, simple piece of PowerShell code added to a PowerShell YAML task. And if we execute it, let's go to Henk. No, that's me, that's Henk. That pipeline, so imagine we created that pipeline, we've added it to a repository, we've added it over here, and we're going to run it. So this should show us, based on the permissions and assumptions what Henk has, only that one variable group. However, you're going to find out in a second that that's actually not true. And the reason for this is this part. If, I don't know if you guys know it or not, maybe some of you do, some don't. What happens in the background, there's actually a service account that is being used to execute all the pipelines. And you can get the PAT token, the way you can get a PAT token for your own user, for that account during execution time. You can read that PAT token, you can actually inject it through these two lines as a system access token, and you can actually use that PAT token to query the API in the context of that service. And depending on how you configured your Azure DevOps organization, if you configured it properly or if it's created after, I think, March 2021, the PAT token that you get is only for your project. So worst case scenario, you can basically download everything from your project. If your Azure DevOps organization is prior to 2021, by default, you're probably running, unless you configured this correctly and aware of this problem, you're running on a organization level account. And this organization level account can scrape the same information, but for all Azure DevOps projects. So what I'm going to show you is in the proper newly configured setup, because that's the actual one, but you could, if the configuration hasn't been done properly, actually scale this out and get variables from all the projects that you actually don't have access to. And you don't even know they exist. By simply querying with a star, you get everything back. So let's see if that happened already. So as you can see, this is the result that I'm actually, and again, zoom in. This is the result that I'm actually getting after running that query. I'm getting a JSON for all the variable groups. The first one is to add a variable, and they are, because it's an array, you get them in a different order every time. So we actually get the key vault one first. And we can see that there are actually 2 secrets in that key vault variable group. Luckily, we can't read the secret value because it's set to secret yet. So the next one is the ADO test group, And we can see whatever is not marked as secret, we saw the, okay. Yeah, it's part of the secret, but it's not allowing me to show the secret. Yeah. Yes, so we can see whatever is not marked as a secret is shown here directly. It's not obfuscated in any way. So this is the first one actually. Please make sure that you mark everything that is a secret as a secret. That way this won't happen. This is the very first basic line of defense. I see it in a lot of organizations, engineers, developers add them there, say, well, nobody has access to that security group anyway. We only gave these and these users access to it. Well, in runtime, you have. And the last one, and again, demo values, we have the my demo vars, and again, everything that is not marked as a secret is shown as plain text. This one you can see is marked as a secret is true. You don't get the text, at least through this execution. So first step here is, I didn't know which variable groups I have. So the first step would be for an attacker to figure out, okay, what kind of secrets do we have? This is the first step. We got all the names. We got all 3 of them over here. So next step is, I don't know, let's see, is it, yeah, it's okay still. No, it's not. Okay. Like I said, no fun without technical difficulties. So next step, now that we, as Henk, figured out how to get the variable groups, we can actually search for specific variable groups and the secret names that we had there. And for this, we can use a second piece of code. And we can actually, let's see, pipeline, and this one, there we go. What we can do is we can use that same SAS token and retrieve those secrets. First, we're mapping the variable groups into our pipeline because we know their names, so we can figure them out which ones they are. And because they're mapped to our variable, as variable groups, we can simply call the secrets that we want in this manner. And as you can see, I'm actually encoding them to base 64 string because the user interface from Azure DevOps does some basic countermeasures. If something is recognized as a string, is recognized as a secret, it will obfuscate it with star, 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 the way your password is. To circumvent that, because nothing gets encoded in the background, it gives you maybe the intention it is, but it doesn't. You simply encode it into a base 64 string, and you can actually get the value out. So let's start the second pipeline. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I'm not sure why this is happening. So it's back again. So we're going to run this pipeline, and I can actually. So in this setup, it's very simple. Add the variables groups here. Write a piece of code to find out which secrets we have, encode them, and the last thing that we need is a little bit of decoder as well, and hopefully I have it somewhere. So we have a decoder, and let's see if the value already, okay, so it's running, checking out. Are there any questions in the meantime, guys? No questions at all. Interesting. So let's give it a sec to have a look at what's happening. And I'm going to show you later on how to circumvent this, because don't worry, first time I tried this, I was like, oh shit, how am I going to prevent this? Because limited user access doesn't obviously work. We have a guy who doesn't have access to those variable groups. What I'm going to do, I'm going to limit access to pipelines. That's also not something you want to do, because you want your engineers and developers to kick off pipelines. You just want to make sure that those pipelines don't access whatever information they shouldn't be accessing.
Maybe a question while we're waiting. What is the minimum type of access that an account needs to have to be able to pull this up?
contributor. Because you need to be able to create this pipeline, or if I guess you are only access to the Git, no, you can't. No, you really need a contributor, or the pipeline needs to be already existing and you need to somehow add a piece of code to a pipeline. On a project level, yes. So you could pull this off with reader and specific access to a Git repo if you have like a broken permission structure. But then the pipeline needs to exist. You need to be able to have it already created, and the only thing you simply do is add a step to that pipeline, and assuming there is some kind of branching policy, you won't be able to do that. If there is no branching policy, of course, then yes, you could pull this even off with reader. I really hope that everybody has their branching policies enabled on any repo. So let's have a look here. We do have the secret pipeline variable, but that's okay. We don't care about that. So the very, very secret value, this is one of the secrets that we actually have, and I'll show you in a sec. If we put it here and we decode it. As you can see, this is my variable group secret. This is the actual value that is put into, and let's go back to the developer. No, that's the key vault one. So the very, very secret variable that you can't see here, you can't access. Oh, I hope I'm not going to do the weird thing again. This is its value. That's it. While, yeah, it's obfuscating it. Again, terrible. I don't know why it's doing it, but I can try. One more time. Yeah, there we go. So, as you can see, this is its value. And we can then jump into the other values as well. So we have here demo key 1 and demo key 2. So before we jump into those, we can go to the library and have a look here. So I have a demo key 1 and a demo key 2. These are actually linked to a key vault. Okay, this is getting annoying. Let's see if we can do something about this. Let's see if that works in the meantime. Gonna go to portal. There should that come and open up. Yeah, no, 1 second. Key vaults. So this is the key vault, as you can see, at the variable group, and we have the secrets. Oh, sorry, secret key 1. Have a look at it. I'm going to show the secret value. This is the value from secret 1. So let's copy paste what we had from Hank's pipeline. We're going to copy paste it, decode it again. Oh my God, my laptop does not want to cooperate with this. Oh. Maybe we need to, I'm going to decode it, and you can see same value. This is the value from secret 1 as we saw here. So the user, Hank, doesn't have access even to this subscription. He's not aware of that there's a key vault there. It does not have access to the variable group. He does have access to the Azure DevOps project. And based on that, he would assume, hey, my secret is safe. It's stored in a key vault. Nobody has access to it, and yet I can get it out. So I'm not going to bother you with the second one. You trust me that when we have one, that we have others as well. So let's see if we can actually continue. And there we go. Okay, not. So this was our setup, right? So we couldn't access it, yet we did. So what's happening? Well, the default configuration for an Azure DevOps project is as follows. There's a build service, like I mentioned earlier, and it runs either on a project level. Then you see the name My Shuttle Build Service and between brackets the name of the organization, or you have an organization level build service that, if you didn't configure it correctly, which is called the same thing but demo RGF. This build service, to be able to properly do its job by default in a default configuration, has access to all your resources. It has access to the service connection, it has access to the pipelines, it has access to the code repo, and it does that based on that path token that I showed you. It's actually using that in the background to access all these things. The same thing goes for the variables. At a certain point, those variables will need to be in runtime injected into whatever code you're running, right? So they need to be decoded. And we can actually abuse that with a smart way and tell that My Shuttle to get all those variables for us and base 64 encode them and print them out simply in the output window. Copy paste the string, or what I've done in a more complex version of this demo is run AZ copy, since it's by default available on the Azure DevOps agents, and simply zip all this information into a zip file and send it to a storage account or whatever API you have to upload to OneDrive. Think of where you want to store it, and you will have one very cool zip file containing all the information from at least the Azure DevOps project, and worst case scenario from the whole organization. So how can we circumvent this? Well, yeah, I'm afraid this might be the issue. Let's see if that will help. Thank you very much. We did our test run for 30 minutes and it ran fine. Let's see if this will help. Yes, so Shift F5. There we go. No. Yes, there we go. So first one, implement a proper RBAC. This one is quite easy. Even if this issue occurs, you still want to limit access to the variable groups, to the pipelines, etc. So having a proper permission setup is the first step. Second one is, like Mike mentioned with this question, implementing a branching policy. The branching policy would prevent somebody to simply inject YAML code with their own malicious PowerShell or Bash code or whatever into a pipeline, merging it, running it, deleting it without you probably noticing it. Next, the third one is actually configure permissions for each variable group. And this is something that is often overlooked. I'm going to show you in a second how to do that. First, let's go through the whole list. And the last one, and this is actually one of the things that happened here, is never ever enable the option grant access permissions to all pipelines, for any pipelines. Because that way I can run my malicious code in any, with any service connection that exists. And if something malicious happens, we still want a couple of things enabled to be able to trace back what happened and see who is, what kind of data spillage you might have, and who is the person responsible for it. So we want to enable log audit events for every project, and we want to ensure that the auditing stream is configured. I'm going to show you all these things in a sec. So the first two, I'm going to show you how to create branching policies on an RBAC. There's lots of documentation on the internet around it, how to do it, best practices, etc. However, the pipeline permissions for each variable group, definitely. So let's go back to our administrator. This is the guy, and we go to the library. And we actually have one of them open, and this is what often gets overlooked. By default, this is not configured. Pipeline permissions. As you can see, there's no restriction here. Therefore, as soon as this variable group gets referenced, like I did in my pipeline, nothing happens. It just reads the secret. And the only thing you have to do is restrict permissions, and you can select to which pipeline the permissions are restricted. I can not select one or select both of them and say you're not allowed to do this. And this way, this one will not be used at all. Obviously, in production situations, you do want to select the specific pipelines you want restrictions for. And we can do the same one for, so we did the key vault for this one. Same thing here, restrict permissions. Again, we didn't select anything. I think it's my laptop that's doing the troublesome stuff. Again, apologies. And let's run that pipeline from Hank's service again. So we have the pipeline secrets, and we can try to run this one. And if I'm correct, we should not be able to here. So the pipeline actually stopped, and it's asking for pipeline permissions before I can actually run it. And it says, hey, these two are required, and as you can see, I'm a regular contributor with my Hank account, and I can't do anything. So this makes it, increases the security tenfold, because only the pipelines that have access to, that need access to specific variable groups have them. A little bit of downside of this configuration is you're probably going to need to split up all your variables instead of one variable group or like 2 or 3 into more granular approach, and that could result in the fact that you will have some overhead with some secrets. It's because of this you would need to specify a secret in multiple variable groups. But I think that's quite a decent price to pay for not spilling all the secrets to somebody who gets compromised, right? So if we would go back to the same pipeline.
I have one question.
Sure.
So in this variable group, there's a difference that we can restrict it via permissions, and then there's also a security where we can define users. So what is the difference, what is the purpose of securing the access via the security on a variable group?
Good question. So the first one, let's go back to the variable group. So the first one is gaining access as a user through the user interface that you see right now. So I've restricted by default when I started this demo, Hank to this library group. So where it is, library, there we go. As you can see, because I restricted the user, he can't see it here. But the service that runs the Azure DevOps agents has by default secret. So the second option is actually restricting, instead of restricting the service, because if you would restrict the service, yes, so you actually restrict which pipeline has access to which variable group in this case. And we can see if I go back as admin, I go to the pipelines, and I go to the pipeline that is actually queued right now. I can say view and see, since I'm an administrator, I can permit and still run them. So that's jumping back to Excel. So this is actually what I mean by configuring pipeline permissions for each variable group. The second one is never enable the option to grant access permissions to all pipelines. And this is when pipelines are created, often by developers, they overlook this option. So if we would go to the project settings and we go to our service connections, and there are 2 service connections here, and one, and you can see there's here, this security checkbox, never ever enable it, please. Because when you do that, this service connection can be used by any pipeline that's part of the project. And what you can do on top of reading the secrets which are actually in the variable groups is you could read also some of the secrets. Thankfully, since last time I did this demo, one of them got fixed. So, but we can still read a lot of information about the Azure environment or whatever the service connection is connected to. In this case, this is an Azure Resource Manager connection, so we can get information about that. And we can do that also quite easily. We pick up, again, our So pipelines, and this is my bonus pipeline. And we run this one in the meantime. Let's wait one minute. And again, I'm running it. Yeah, it's my laptop. That's I'm not sure what's wrong with it, but we'll have to run it like that. So in the meantime, I can show you what the pipeline actually does. So this is the code that I'm using here. And again, through the system access token, what I'm able to do is I can print it out as a variable, encode it, and gain the actual path token. This path token is active and usable as long as for the maximum duration of the pipeline. So if your pipeline is set to maximally timeout after 60 minutes, this token is valid for 60 minutes. If it's longer, it's longer. This enables me to simply grab the token and run an API query from a different location, for example, and get more information because I have a more powerful or flexible setup. I don't need the pipelines anymore to access the rest of the information. An option for this. So let's see if the pipeline finished running and have a look. So as you can see, the access token value is a quite long one, and we can decode that one and get the information, or we can, for example, get the app registration ID. So let's see if we can decode that one. And you can actually get the app ID, and we can look it up in our system. So let's get the administrator here. App registrations. Oh, and there you go. That's the token, or the ID, sorry. Thankfully, the secret is no longer available. Otherwise, if the secret was also available, you could simply connect to Azure and nobody would know. So, additional level of security that we can add here. And again, these are basic measures. There's much more to do to properly secure an Azure DevOps, because Azure DevOps is a great product, but like Azure or any other Microsoft product, you do need to take care some, you do need to have some consideration with regards to security and compliance. So one of the most important things is to have traceability, and we can do that by enabling the log audit events. So if we go to Azure DevOps, there's actually, and you do this on organization level, it's also possible on a project level, but I think this is the most important one. First, you enable it on organization level through a policy, and it's very simple. It's super simple. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't make your project more expensive. You're not going to get more licensing fees. You simply enable this slider, and after that, you get logging. So what do you get after that? You get the auditing option. And the auditing option will show you every action that I've just done with which account. I could export it. This is already an improved traceability, because you could at least see, okay, who started the pipeline, when it was run, by which account, etc. The better option is to implement it into the streams. And if you're already using an Azure DevOps environment, I hope you have your logging and compliance configured. So I assume there should be a log analytics workspace somewhere. And that's what makes this option cool. So you can either stream it to Splunk, push it to Event Grid and have Event Grid react to it with events, or very simply add it to a log analytics workspace and integrate it. And to jump a bit onto the next topic of our next presenters, then you can do something with Defender, you can do queries with Sentinel with it. The information becomes available through the same way you have your logging for all your Azure resources. So you could actually create also end-to-end logs where you can see something started a pipeline, that pipeline deployed something, this is the deployment that happened, and these resources have been created, modified, or these access permissions have been changed. So you could truly have a end-to-end from a developer pushing his code into a feature branch, that feature branch being merged, all the way to the final results where that code is actually running or configuring something in your production environment. And with this, I would like to conclude my little demo and setup. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If there are more questions, ladies first.
Thank you, Jeff. It was a great demo. And I really like that first unicorn slide because that really captures the silos between developers and the security people.
Yeah.
The demo that you presented today, probably it's good practices for developers
Yes.
to keep security in mind while developing. However, today probably you and I, people like us in this room, can think from both perspectives, but usually developers are so siloed, even the security guys are siloed, but developers are so focused on writing so many lines of code that it's very difficult to remember these good practices.
Yes, exactly.
What if there was a way to break those silos? I see that smile. There is a way to break those silos and still promote good practices automatically through, let's say, pull request annotations or push request annotations, so that the developer is reminded that, hey, go to line 34, change the encryption.
Yes.
Things like those.
I have a hunch that you're going to tell us more in your session about this. Or am I wrong? It would be great. It would be great. It's definitely something that I would look forward to, because I do feel, I know we're with a quite decent group here, but I often feel kind of left alone with this mindset, where we have developers or engineers focusing on their thing, engineers focusing on the pipeline or infrastructure as code, developers making sure their code compiles and it gets deployed into the right container, or the right container gets pushed to the right environment, and the security people often focus, but also the organization from a compliance point of view, focusing on, for example, a pen test for the application. So I've been in projects where they considered the whole project security as compliant and safe by simply pen testing the actual application. And when you open the code, you see lines and lines of hard-coded secrets, or even the worst thing I've ever seen is a certificate with the private key exported in a Git repo, which is actually a certificate for their root domain. So you could do a domain takeover on Azure. For those who know what that is, you're going to lose your tenant. And it takes quite some time to get it back, because the procedure is not easy. Microsoft is not going to hand it to you very easily, because, well, that's in the shared responsibility model. That's kind of your responsibility. They will help you, but what happened in those hours, days, you basically lost, and you have to a lot of compliance and challenges, etc. So yeah, I can't wait for this to be integrated properly, and there we could have a uniform place where we could just see our security and compliance posture, not just for the resources or the application access, but also for our supply chain of our application.
On the software side, I would say that this kind of session is also something that we need to do as behind you is these kind of practice. You need to do it over and over and over again to get cross-pollination across all teams.
You had a question?
Yeah, I would like to pursue the topic of implementation and actually like push out, push notifications, so on and so forth. So let's assume we live in ideal world. These measures will help us, but we live in non-ideal world, and there is some always attacker who can find the breach in our defense.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be your point of view? How often we should rotate secrets? Yes.
How often you should rotate secrets?
Yes, we have this.
I'm gonna give you a consultant answer. As often as possible, or it depends. Well, I think the development cycle, if your development cycle is interrupted by this, then there's improvement for your automation.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I often do on a project where I'm able to create a whole platform is rotate these secrets or certificates, whatever option you go for, as often as possible. And in one of the projects we achieved, I think, like the highest level possible of this. Every time a pipeline is run, the secret got rotated. Mm-hmm. And this is possible without having to intervene with developers, because it's done by automation and it's done in a smart way. I mean, I can get a whole separate presentation on this. But if I would look at Microsoft right now for app registrations, one thing that can be improved, I'm not sure if I'm looking at the right people here, but when we implemented a rotation on a daily basis, what you get and I'll show it actually, because that's much more fun. If we go into the app registrations, you can see here, certificate current, you get a green nice box. If your certificate or secret is less than 3 months old, you get an exclamation mark there. If you truly want to implement security as code, in my opinion, this exclamation mark should be configurable to your own interval. So one of the things on one of my clients I got back from the SOC team is they said, hey, all your secrets from all your production pipelines are expiring. Why? Because we rotate them on a daily basis. And because they are only valid for a day, the user interface actually made the SOC team a bit panicky, because they're like, oh my God, we're going to have production interruption, panic, help.
They're getting errors every day.
Yeah, that's what they thought, but that was by design. So that's something interesting to see. So if I would follow the advice that the Microsoft portal and the Azure portal gives, at least every 3 months. And preferably more often if your process allows for it.
And you can automate that by using event command.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's how we did it. Every run, we generated actually a certificate that was specifically done for that.
Check whether pipeline was finished or not, or it's executed, for example.
Yeah, you have a lot of stuff. You can do all kind of steps. For example, we're not going to cover this topic today, but one of the fun topics with doing this is injecting steps. I need to remember the proper name of how it's called. It's not dependency injection, but decorators. You can create the pipeline decorators, which are steps that you can forcibly include into any pipeline, disregarding whether you have that step or not. And you can use those types of steps to generate a certificate, put it into a container, compile that container, run whatever you need to do, throw away the container, throw away the certificate. That's what I've done in the past for the highly secured workloads, where we 100%, where security has like the topest of priority. So that's the maximum level that you can go to right now. Maybe with fancy stuff like ChatGPT AI, we could do something more fun with AI even with this. That's what I'm looking at right now. How can we figure out how to use this kind of technology to not, because right now everybody's looking at these AIs, can we read logs, how we can react to logs, parse logs. I would love to go much deeper where a piece of AI takes care of my security for me and a security and compliance next to it, but we'll see.
You're triggering request to ChatGPT to do something for you.
that could judge your secret strength, verify if I'm using a certificate, whether its chain is still valid, and not in a reactive way, like, because we do that already, but we do it in a reactive way, but actually in a proactive way. That would be great. I think that's the next step where we could head to. So, and as you can see, my laptop is even secure because it doesn't want to cooperate the whole evening.
By some reason, laptop just understands that we show them secret.
Yeah, it's a Microsoft laptop. It's like, no. No, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what's wrong with it. Unfortunately, I rather spend the time to explain to you, and I hope you forgive me for my technical challenges instead of debugging my laptop. So, any other questions?
Do you know if the behavior of the pipelines you showed depends on the type of the agent of the directory?
Not the type, you mean like hosted agent or private agent? No, because it's literally the same piece of software that gets installed. You can Google, and you can, if you want, I can give you the URL of the Git repo that contains literally how this agent is compiled, which containers used. The whole thing is super transparent at Microsoft Way. It's great if you want to use your own container and don't want to start from scratch. You simply start from theirs. But because of that, it's identical piece of software, so it runs identically whether it's their installation or your installation. When it comes to the functionality, quite difficult to restore. I actually broke it once to a level that I had to create a new project. I couldn't restore it anymore. So rather than trying to limit its permissions, limit the integration between your pipeline, your service connections, and your variable groups. If you can match those one-to-one with the tool set that I just showed you, that would be a much stronger way of countering any kind of potential leakage of code. And of course, the first two options, RBAC policies, I mean, those should be, for any organization by now, default de facto standard. And please integrate your logging, because it's as valuable as the logging from your services or your Azure resources that you run. Other questions, guys?
One question, PAT token also, if we, the validity of PAT token, if we decrease that validity, will it also be a countermeasure for security?
Sorry?
A PAT token is valid for some time of extent, let's say 3
Yeah.
months or 1 year.
PAT token, for your user, you configure your own length and you can select what its validity is. It's a bit of an old technology because it's a wrapped basic authentication. I know it's on the backlog of the product team, if I'm not mistaken, to implement this in a better way, because GitHub does this much better, much smarter. It uses OAuth for this. So yeah, right now your Achilles heel would be the PAT token, and the one that is generated for this service, is its duration is equal to the duration of the runtime of your pipeline, or your timeout of your pipeline. And the one you create for your own user, yeah, that one is a bit more difficult to maintain. That really depends on the user. That's why the user permissions, when I started the RBAC, is equally important. Because if that token gets saved somewhere or get lost, and that user has not a least privileged implementation, you're gonna lose more data or more secrets or more valuable information than you accounted for initially.
So to the point of that question, if you have multiple shorter running pipelines, your attack vector is smaller because the token that is used for the pipeline is...
Yeah, the attack surface is lower, the shorter the period. That's why the question for rotating the secrets is very interesting. It actually depends on a risk analysis. What is a acceptable risk versus the duration of that runtime. So what's an acceptable risk for the attack surface that you're creating with that duration? And this is a challenging field. It really depends on the organization, how mature they are in security and compliance, to answer that question. A lot of companies that are starting with the cloud or are still there will have this answer for on-prem, for all kind of, but not for the cloud. So assume that you're not going to get an answer here. So what I do is I default back to advice of Microsoft and look into the at least they informed by then, instead of finding it out later and you saying during lunch, well, I knew that. Nobody has any value when you place that kind of remark. So yeah. Other stuff?
Jackie, how's your experience with cameras?
Yeah, okay. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to our presentation. Today our goal is that we're going to demystify threat intelligence. So we're going to talk about a set of topics starting out with an introduction and pulse check. We're going to describe what is threat intelligence, why should you use threat intelligence, and ways how you can and so who are we? My name is Sarah Vette. I'm a security cloud solution architect at Microsoft. So in my role, I help organizations to use our security, compliance, and identity portfolio to their best value. And that goes all the way from architecture design
chance to meet some of this drink/dinner session. For others, I'm a security technical specialist at Microsoft. My designation basically means anything that's new to a customer or Microsoft launches new. In the realm of security, I'm supposed to take that to the customer, do demos, talk them through it, remove any roadblocks, and so on. Like we said, threat intelligence is our newly developed capability, so we are going to talk about that today. Prior to Microsoft, I'm also, similar to Sarah, coming from a consulting background. There are a few brand names written on the slide just to brag about, but I'm not going to go over those. Apart from work, I really enjoy adventure sports. I'm about to take my certification in PADI, that's scuba diving, so that's a little bit about me. Yeah. And we are also curious to know more about you guys, which is why we have a quick pulse check. So you guessed it right, take out your phones. Needless to say, you're all connected to internet. So please scan this, and once you're all in, we will switch to Mentimeter. Everybody in?
Yeah, but the question I think is more related to EPAM itself or our customers we work with. Like, for example, how to use the output of threat into solution.
Your organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, your organization.
and if you don't
support our systems.
then you can choose whatever option you're familiar with. It's not to gather any intelligence about the company.
So we're not storing any data. Just
to get in.
It's all the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe then I share it. Or you
Oh,
share.
that's okay. So I'm going to open the Mentimeter, and we are, just to know you guys for the sake of this session and to sort of maneuver our presentation better, request you to write down your current role. K1. Who is K1?
Sorry,
That's fine. Don't worry about it. It's okay. You can speak it out. Your current role.
My current role in .NET backend developer.
Okay, perfect.
In Rabobank.
Perfect. In Rabobank.
Yes.
I work a lot with your teams. We should catch up. System architect, another architect. Okay. Oh wow, cloud architect, lead solution architect.
Perfect roles you guys have.
4 so far. Okay, perfect.
I love the architect presence. Really cool.
Yeah. So if there are more people typing architects, it will not flash again and again. So I'm assuming all of you guys have already put in your inputs. So with that, we move on. And kudos to the EPAM guys, because we have very relevant roles for today's session. The next one. Come on, move on. Okay, so what threat solutions are currently being used? If this subject is really new to you, just feel free to pass or just put an X, that's also fine. We are not here to grill you, we are just trying to know you better.
Oh, nice, Microsoft Defender.
Okay,
Nothing.
that's fine. Lovely.
Nice.
Okay, perfect. Good to see our brands there. Firewalls, data log, okay. Data log, okay.
Yeah, because they don't see the screen. They only see the posture.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
How do we display that?
You can extend your
Yeah, I'm duplicating it. Shit, I didn't realize that, sorry. This one? Yeah. Okay, there you go.
Super.
Okay.
So hopefully we can inspire the nothing.
If you don't have anything, you don't have to secure it, right?
Yeah.
They say the most secure laptop is the one in concrete.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Which one out of these industries is targeted the most by nation-state threats? Which one do you think it is? Information technology, finance, government, healthcare, energy. Okay, one each so far.
I
Nobody
see.
cares about your patient data, guys.
only relates to government systems.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, we are not asking about threats. We are not asking about ransomware. We are saying nation-state threats.
I see a clear picture.
Yeah. So energy is second with 14%. The first one is information technology at 22%. You said IT. Okay, perfect. Moving on. What are your current challenges with respect to threat intelligence? If nothing comes to mind, feel free to type X and go ahead, press submit. So that way we will know that we have to move on. Knowledge, innovation.
What was that?
The pulse code again, yeah. This? Organization maturity. Convince customer to take it seriously.
Do you see a picture that currently it's maybe not taken seriously enough?
Yes, until they got a bill in bitcoins, they find about their security. They pretty much do themselves. Not as a user.
And in terms of lack of knowledge, lack of teams understanding. So maybe some of you.
They operate with like organizational measures, but they don't understand how to be translated into technical implementation. Sometimes it's just impossible to do it in the way or implement in the way they want it to be.
And which way would they want it to be?
Sometimes they describe some things like it could be done easily, but from like a technical implementation perspective, you have to implement some kind of workarounds, like to provide some automation or some logging or some kind of additional triggers which should be triggered when some event happens, like and so on and so forth. So it's not provided out of the box. They need to understand that many things should be done bespoke for exact special needs of the organization.
Customized.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure. Okay, so good inputs. With this,
Oops.
that's fine. I think you guys already entered.
Oh yeah.
So the question was, how do you use the output of a threat intelligence solution in your organization today? So this is also something that we will discuss, but based on the output, I already see that it's all of the above, which means you're feeding it to an extended detection response solution, you're feeding it to a SIEM solution, and you are using it as a repository of published articles. And we will talk more about all of these things, but maybe some of you are already familiar with these usages. Okay, so that was a quick Mentimeter pulse check, so to say. And that's the end. Thank you, guys. No, just kidding. We are going to do the presentation. That was not it. We just wanted to understand more from you about how you are going about the topic and what comes to your mind when it comes to threat intelligence. With that, let's talk about what is threat intelligence from our perspective, and we will go into the whys and the hows and the demos later on. So with this, I pass it on to Sarah.
So what is threat intelligence? It's basically a collection of resources that helps you identify current threats, emerging threats, the threat landscape, and ways to defend against it, in short. So that can be a summary of resources, can be reports, it can be technical information like IOCs and malicious IP addresses, anything around the realm that makes you understand how a certain adversary operates and makes you understand, okay, maybe there's a certain technique that they're currently using a lot, maybe a tactic that they're applying a lot, and to leverage that within your organization. That's in summary what threat intelligence is all about. So there are 4 main themes. Okay, this is arguable because it's up to interpretation how you want to summarize these, but in general, you could summarize it under strategic threat intelligence, operational, tactical, and technical threat intelligence. Strategic threat intelligence is to inform about new trends and motives of attackers. So this is to inform, for instance, your CXOs, CIOs, CISOs, and executives boards of what are certain motivations of attackers. For instance, if it's ransomware, it's very often the financial gain that motivates the attacker. And this is very important to inform them to understand when they are making strategic decisions on the company. Operational threat intelligence usually is defined as the techniques, tactics, and procedures about a certain adversary, what they're commonly using, what's seen very often in the field. This is usually relevant for security vulnerability managers, but also, for instance, the incident response team, for instance, when they are investigating a certain incident, that they identify common behaviors of a certain adversary. So this helps them also to make sure that they have covered all the steps that maybe that attacker has used in the organization to make sure when they do also the cleanup and the aftercare after the incident that they can remove all the relevant steps. Yeah.
I understand why SOC team is an operational tower, but can you please elaborate a bit more why SOC team is also in technical tower?
For instance, it really also depends within the SOC team who would be looking at that, and in general the techniques and the tactics and the procedures are also relevant for them to understand which attacks they should be looking at if they see a certain alert, to also cross-reference with the threat intelligence solution maybe which adversary was using that.
So in other words, operational is SOC team because they provide the support
Yeah. Why?
Because like all other things is like it's tools, right? Like
Yeah.
PM,
I would say it's which
The
decisions?
decision maker on an individual level, whether an IP address or a hash is probably.
Yeah, the person who's making the configuration based on those IP addresses is more in the technical area.
Yeah, and so I mean not the
Yeah.
decision like on a strategic level or
No,
not, but
no.
the decision on a very deep dive technical
Yeah.
level. Okay, I consider this a possible threat, yes or no. That's the technical one.
But based on what threat intelligence or based on what incident or what alert, even a SOC manager could take that decision in a tactical quadrant. So it depends case to case, and we will also talk about it in the upcoming slides. Yeah.
And again, this is also these 4 metrics. If you look online, you will always find a different definition to these. So
I'm not like to judge, like
Yeah.
ask the question, not to judge, but just like
Yeah.
understand what
yeah, exactly. Super. So I want to also elaborate a bit on what are common threat intelligence frameworks. So the basis that I always look at is the cyber kill chain model, because it is something, for instance, Mitra also bases their attack framework on, which I will show just in a bit. Again, it depends on which source you're looking at. They might define the steps differently, but it's all about that you start out with reconnaissance. An attacker might go on a company's website, try to find an org chart, try to find what are the names of people working in the organization, what is maybe the email structure they're using. Is it, I don't know, first name, last name, dot company, .com, and thereby trying to identify the email addresses of these people, understanding how which infrastructure they need to use for their attack, also which, for instance, type of malware they would use for their attack, and then to set up, for instance, phishing emails, the infrastructure for that, send that to the person that they've identified, with the email address they've identified, and maybe then even leveraging the information they found about that person on LinkedIn, maybe on Instagram, maybe on Facebook, where that person has recently been on vacation, and then use that also in the email that they are sending to that person to make it really difficult for the person to determine, is this real or is this not? Which then, if for instance it asks you to verify, I don't know, log in with your Microsoft credentials, and that person would then type in the credentials, then the attacker would then get his initial access. Some attackers really like to also establish persistence, because that means even if, for instance, the machine is shut down, they would still, for instance, have the credentials of the person and then can log in again. Or if they install malware on a device, that even if the device is shut down and if it starts again, that they can still establish connection with the command and control server that they have. And what then most attackers would do, for instance, in this example, is to execute lateral movement, try to get from the device and the identity that the person that has been breached to go laterally through the network, try to look if there are any admin credentials that they can harvest, maybe if the person has also access to the Azure environment, and go from there. With the ultimate end would be then, of course, the domain access, which can be very detrimental. They can delete everything, or they could exfiltrate everything, or whatever harm they want to cause, they're free to do that. Something we also see is selling the credentials online to leave up to anybody to do what they want for sale. And yeah, that's just a typical framework. And then we have the MITRE ATT&CK framework. This is a very commonly known framework in the industry. It again has the same mapping as the cyber kill chain model, going from reconnaissance all the way to exfiltration. And it's really nice because it's accessible to anybody. It has an enterprise setup. It also has a setup for industrial control systems that is very targeted to see what's commonly seen in the field. It has resources as well that you can further research and get more information of what patterns are similarly seen with that certain attacker. And I also want to elaborate what are common sources you can get threat intelligence from. So first of all, there's first-party threat intelligence. So this would be, for instance, honeypots, any malicious IP addresses that you've gathered during security investigations in your own company. So this is generally something you would do in your own company and then thereby gather that first-party threat intelligence. There's also third-party data sources. For instance, that's any open source threat intelligence that's being shared, threat intelligence sharing communities. For instance, if two companies are in the same industry, sometimes they collaborate on sharing threat intelligence amongst them to say, hey, I'm seeing this, do you also see that? Or, hey, we faced this attack, maybe you can at least learn from what we've seen. Or also purchase threat intelligence fees. There are companies that publish this, and you can also leverage that in the organization. And then the third pillar is the analyst and human-based threat intelligence. So this is what the threat intelligence team in an organization has observed and seen and thereby gathered. Yep.
How much is different from first threat intelligence? Because it anyway is also collected by our own stuff.
Yeah, you could also put the analyst human-based into the first party, but I've also wanted...
Some kind of subset of the...
Yeah.
Does Microsoft have a standard list for the purchase TI fees that they advise? Because for some products I know they have. They say, well, you should subscribe at least to these lists. Do you guys share that information somewhere? Is that available anywhere?
We used to do that, but we took that page down. And that was also not very formal because now some of you guys might know that in the past 1.5 year, we have acquired this company called Risk IQ that used to be a leading name in threat intelligence space. A tangible outcome of that acquisition is that Microsoft has launched its own 2 new solutions. One of them is Defender Threat Intelligence that can take care of what you asked. And the other one is Defender External Attack Surface Management, which we will not go too deep in today. Yeah, if you're good at something.
But this is standard approach, right? If it's something is good, you buy it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only Microsoft, it's everybody.
Yeah. And we'll also give you some stats and figures on why we took that decision. So we'll talk about those.
Yeah, but we also do have some threat intelligence ingrained in our products, so it's not something that you necessarily have to buy, but it's also coming with our products, so you can also leverage that piece.
So shouldn't that be kind of part of the third-party data that you're kind of there as well?
Because we are not giving that away. So for example, in the Mentimeter, when we asked you what is the source of your threat intelligence, some of you guys answered Sentinel. Now, Sentinel is a SIEM solution, but yes, it is capturing some level of threat intelligence. It is not third party because we are not giving that away to someone else. We are using it internally to enhance the use cases or to enhance response to incidents.
So you don't provide it in the form of a feed or response?
Through Sentinel and other solutions, but what we are providing is things via Defender for Threat Intelligence, which we'll discuss. Yeah? Go on, sir.
And there's also some key pillars that are very important when you look at threat intelligence to really make it valuable. Because if you just have a bunch of data feeds and you're overwhelmed by data feeds, because of course there are new, if you would ingest all the data feeds to Sentinel, for instance, it would not be necessarily of a lot of value because you still have to look at these, for instance, 4 pillars. Is it comprehensive? Is it making sure that the analyst has to do as least as possible manual work? For instance, if they find a certain IP address, that they don't have to manually cross-check against a bunch of different data feeds what the information is. But also, to minimize that effort of having just being overwhelmed with data. So having just enough data that it helps you, and for instance in Sentinel there's also a comparison available which allows you to check what's the uniqueness of the data feed that you are ingesting to Sentinel, and based on that you can make a decision of is that the data feed actually adding unique value, or am I just ingesting a bunch of duplicates. And the second pillar is it relevant? Is it relevant to my organization? I'll also dive that in just a second. And the third one is it contextualized? Because as I said, data in itself might not be relevant for you, because you need recommendations, you need insights of what do I do with this now? Like just having an IP address flying around will not add value to you, but you want to have the context. Okay, in which context is this used? What is that threat actor doing usually? And that's where it really becomes valuable. And the fourth pillar that adds immense value is integration. Integration into your security portfolio, into your tooling, and having it natively integrated. That is a goal as in having threat intelligence of value. And diving deeper into the relevancy, if you want to have it relevant for your organization, you would look at, is it relevant for my industry? Because, for instance, a company in the finance sector has a very different threat landscape than, for instance, the bakery next door. So they would have to face a different set of threat actors, and thereby also implement a different set of controls. Because if you would just blindly start implementing all sorts of control, you might overspend your budget, you might have limited resources, and it's not very efficient. So you want to make sure that it's actually valuable and relevant for your organization. Also the geography, for instance, we see common patterns between certain countries that have a geopolitic agenda and thereby increased alerts. And of course also any relevant global events in the security world, but also in general that are occurring, so that you also keep up to date on those and that you're informed. So why should you use threat intelligence?
Perfect. So I hope it is clear until now what threat intelligence is. Right? So it is not just any intelligence or any piece of info. It is information about a threat actor who is sitting outside your environment, an adversary who may or may not attack you, about his or her toolkits, the methods they may deploy, the IPs they may use, and everything that they have in their ammunition. So that is threat intelligence. Why do we want to look at adversaries? Is it not okay to protect my perimeters only? Because protection is better than cure, so can't I only protect my perimeter and forget about the third party?
Question. So actually threat intelligence is counterintelligence.
Exactly, exactly. So in order to safeguard my boundaries, I need to know about the enemy. So in order to stay one step ahead of them, we need to use threat intelligence, and we will show you how.
Yeah, it's actually also very commonly used in the military, right? Because it's the same concept that you want to know where is my opponent moving towards, and thereby be well equipped to defend against it.
Yeah, and also in the military, like how much armor do you need, how much ammunition do you need, how much should you spend on that ammunition? And that's exactly the first point. You need not implement all the controls that may cost you a ton of money and then say, okay, I have implemented A, B, C, D, and hence I don't have any risks on me. No, you need to take risk-based decisions. So depending on information about your threat actors, you can define your risks and then protect yourself mostly against those risks and then optimize budgets. Secondly, in threat landscape, it's always better to be proactive. You may be a leader in your industry. Let's talk about financial services industry. Maybe there is a leading bank that is targeted first, or maybe the central banks which are targeted first. So they need to be proactive. Knowing threat actors and their toolkits, I think as the statement suggests, there is no need to explain there. Faster response time. So we really need to reduce that latency because we don't need to hear about attacks from the teams after they have happened, but before, by knowing that this is an exposure path, an attack could happen here. So to reduce that latency, we need faster response time. And lastly, we have talked about human-operated ransomware. Because these days, what is the goal of a hacker? What is the end state? To demand ransom. Now, there used to be a conventional way of launching ransomware attacks. There is a new way of launching ransomware attacks these days. Some of you might have heard about it. It's called human-operated ransomware or big game ransomware. There are no algorithms, bare minimum algorithms used in this technique. It is not just that the hacker presses execute and then waits. There is intelligent human being sitting behind the laptop and changing the technique every now and then based on your moves. And it is very, very targeted. It costs a lot of money to the organization if they are breached. So it is much more detrimental than the conventional ransomware. So these are the top few reasons why you would require threat intelligence in your organization. And what teams could benefit from it? Security operations teams, of course, for their daily tasks. Like we explained in the technical and operational pieces, threat intel could actually change the configurations. Incident response team could respond to incidents and alerts in a much better way, or could decide whether it's a false positive or a true positive based on the threat intel. Threat hunters could do proactive threat hunting in the environment if they know that there are adversaries in the market that are using new toolkits or exploiting 0 days and so on. And the last two, of course. So cyber threat intelligence analysis and cyber security research teams can also make the most out of it. So you should not feel that threat intelligence is only to be utilized by the SOC teams. It can be utilized by all of these teams in their own tasks. Now, we've discussed about why threat intelligence is important and what it is. Let's talk about ways in which we can obtain threat intelligence and then use that threat intelligence.
Your attack surface to identify adversaries in the infrastructure, and in the end, how you can supercharge your defense with threat intelligence. Starting out with understanding your attack surface, one way to do this is using Microsoft Defender for Cloud. This is not necessarily a threat intelligence solution, but this is how you can identify what are your weaknesses in your organization. So for instance, the newly launched Cloud Security Explorer, which you see a screenshot of the left, I've basically looked for the vulnerabilities that are common for Log4j, and with just a single click of the button, I would be able to find the virtual machines that are affected by this vulnerability. I can then build a graph in terms of which are my vulnerabilities in the organization to understand which attack surface I currently have in my own organization, so that I know and understand where my vulnerabilities are and how an attacker could possibly attack me. For instance, here I see I have a public IP and a public virtual machine, or an internet exposed SQL running on a virtual machine, and that of course could be an attack vector into my organization.
Their infrastructure. So in order to do that, Defender Threat Intelligence, which is the new solution by Microsoft, it uses all of these things. So open source intelligence, some of you might be familiar with OSINT scans, which basically crawl dark web and deep web, and they look at the threats, the threat actors who are active there, and then by means of OSINT scans, you can get that information. So that's one part of Defender Threat Intelligence. It can do OSINT scans. It can replace OSINT solutions. Second one is commercial threat intelligence. We will talk about two different types of threat intelligence. One is really raw piece of data, and the other one is finished threat intelligence, which is published articles which are also there on internet. And last one is security control add-on. So how does it integrate with other solutions? What can you do with raw and finished threat intelligence? How can you use it? Having said that, I am going to launch all the animations. So there were two questions in the beginning. First one was, I know who commented, but somebody commented, if you are good at it, then make sure you don't do it for free, right? Yes. So when we were Risk IQ or Passive Total, we used to get 2 billion signals per day. Look at the amount of signals we are processing now. It's 43 trillion. So the richer the data set, the more threat intel we can extract out of it. Yes, we have to filter out a lot of noise, but we can get more threat intel. There was another question at the beginning, which I think, Jeff, you asked. How is the intelligence that is there in Microsoft solutions, like Defender for Cloud or Sentinel, are we not giving it away? So the idea is that all these logos that you see here, Windows, Cloud, Kubernetes clusters, containers, JSON files, Azure Cloud, you also see the green icon, that's for Xbox. Xbox is our largest attacked surface, and you won't believe the amount of threat intelligence that we are extracting from Xbox and using it in other sources. So the point I'm trying to make is that we used to, as Microsoft, gather threat intelligence from all of these solutions, all of these surfaces. And now that we have the most powerful threat intelligence logic from Risk IQ after acquisition, think about the kind of power that Microsoft has in this space. So I just wanted to give you this entire picture. There is also an icon of the silicon chip that goes inside the computers. So even that could be a source of attack. So these are the kind of numbers that we are looking at. So 72 billion threats blocked per day. 8,500 plus dedicated security researchers and engineers who are sitting behind the tool and looking at things actively. Right?
When you mentioned that Xbox is the largest attack
Yeah.
surface, is that because there are just so much more Xbox devices, or why is that the largest pool?
Because firmware security has still not grown to its fullest, and firmwares are easiest to attack.
So it's just, it has more vulnerabilities, so it gets attacked more often.
Yeah. Plus it's difficult to, I mean, you can of course hack someone's Xbox account and do things with it, but imagine hacking a chip, a piece of chip. Like, how would you hack a piece of hardware? So that complexifies things, but at the same time makes it easy because it's difficult to put security controls on that piece of hardware. In the past, and I've done a full seminar on this, in the past, hackers have actually pulled out a bigger gun, so to say, to hack that piece of chip, and Microsoft has had to put a piece of plastic on that chip so that there are no direct radiations that hack that piece of chip. So crazy stories behind Xbox.
Ghost tree and...
Yes. Yeah. So with that, I want to also show you how Defender Threat Intelligence works. So firstly, it's about internet reconnaissance. Every day, we send our sensors, our active passive interactions, and our web crawlers out to 8 billion websites, or possibly all the websites out there in the world, based on the seed URL that you provide. So of course, if you want threat intelligence related to your organization, then you can provide a seed value or not. Based on that, it just scrapes the entire internet. Then the next one is analysis and automation done by our machine learning and artificial intelligence engines, which translate that entire data set into meaningful information so that you can build a graph of the internet. Who is linked to what? So Sarah showed the attack path in the Cloud Security Explorer slide right before this. So how is that created? How do we know which asset is linked to what, which threat adversary is doing what? by use of this global internet graph. Once this is created, the output is raw threat intelligence or finished threat intelligence. Finished threat intelligence is nothing but the articles that are published also on the internet. Defender threat intelligence helps you in terms of not having to go to a search engine and look for all those articles, because it provides a single repository of all those articles. That's as far as finished threat intelligence is concerned. There is a lot more work that we do when it comes to raw threat intelligence, and we will demonstrate that in the upcoming slides. Yeah? Any questions so far? None? Super. Last one is supercharging your defense with threat intelligence. What do I do with the raw threat intelligence? I feed it into an XDR solution or a SIEM solution. So, of course, being native to Microsoft, Defender Threat Intelligence integrates with M365 Defender, in future also Defender for Cloud. Once you feed the raw threat intel into the XDR solution, you will get much more refined alerts, incidents, user behavior analysis kind of insights, and so on. Same goes for Sentinel.
So in Sentinel, through the Content Hub, there are also a lot of resources available. For instance, the Risk queue, Eliminate, and the Threat Intelligence. They would already come with a set of playbooks, analytics rules, and data connectors that really get you started really quickly, and thereby also integrate threat intelligence into your SIEM solution.
Yep. Some of the stuff that we are showing you is also in preview state right now. We are building more and more connectors so that we become Microsoft native in true sense, because people who use Microsoft solutions, they know how everything is interconnected and can feed into each other, from DevOps to containers to SIEM solutions and so on. We are also trying to integrate, not trying to, but we are actually integrating everything that's threat intelligence into our SIEM and XDR solutions. Having said that, let's take a glimpse of the tool and what the tool looks like. Also being conscious of time, let's dive right into this. So this is my demo environment for threat intelligence. This is the home page of Defender Threat Intelligence. So as you can see, these are the featured pieces of news in threat intelligence. Let's take a look at one. So an overview of Copernicum's recent command and control infrastructure part 2. So Copernicum is a threat actor or a threat group. You will see a full description right from the overview to what Copernicum is, what did the OSINT scans found, all the IPs that are in use, the first scene, last scene of those IP addresses, the ports that they use, ASN, the domains that they resolve to, and so on. So a very rich set of information. It keeps going on and on. This is probably just a piece of text for the solution architects that are present here, or even for me. But for SOC analysts, this piece of information is really useful. They know what to do with these IPs and so on. So indicators, you will see that there are 3 threat indicators. First one is a URL. So you can see HXXPS, of course, suspicious. Then there is SHA-256 hash, that's probably repository for public indicators also. Right next to it, you see what is not public, something that we found out for you. And that's 121 list of indicators. So if I click there, you can see it's SHA-256 hashes, it's a bunch of IP addresses, SSL certificates, domain names, and so on. Right? And the list goes on and on and on. Now, of course, all of this is downloadable. If you want to export this somewhere, you can download this. You can also share this, email it, or copy the link. The reason I'm showing this is that many a times a SOC engineer needs to communicate back with a SOC analyst or back with the threat intel team, or vice versa. A threat team may want to communicate back to the SOC team. So we are giving built-in integrations wherein you can simply share a link. Now, let's take any example. So if I take an example of public indicator and I see a domain name, bbcnewsagency.com. If I click on this, then I get a very rich set of intelligence in this regard. So what's going to load up is more information about that domain and why that particular domain is a threat indicator. So here you can see a summary and data. Data is even more blown up, why bbcnewsagency.com is a threat indicator. Here you will see that we have given, or Microsoft Threat Intelligence has given this URL a score of 100, which is the most malicious. Reason being, we have certain rules underneath based on which we judge how malicious a particular indicator is. This one is 100% malicious, a score of 100 on 100. You can see the description. So it was published in the Risk IQ Intelligence article, and then there is a full description link that tells you why it is malicious. If there was an orange square next to it, then it would mean that the registrar rule is getting broken, which means the domain registered using this registrar is frequently used with associated with suspicious behavior. So similarly, there could be a domain that is using a name server that is associated with suspicious behavior, or domain is registered with an email provider that is suspicious. And likewise, the resolving IP address could also be suspicious. Now, the last one is least severe for obvious reasons, but then if you are looking at a domain name or a URL that may resolve to an IP address that may or may not be suspicious, then you can further click on that IP and check its score. And to avoid all of this, doing all of this manually, we are building the integration to Sentinel. Right? Now, this is just the reputation part. If you go down, you will see analyst insights, you will see Intel profiles. Right now, there is none available. Associated articles, so everything that is published out there. Key resolutions, so this URL resolves to these two IPs. First seen, last seen. So you can see this is a pretty recent one, but we also have domain names and URLs that resolve to IPs that were last seen in 2015. So why are they still around? Why are they still in my organization? Right? And then down below you can see the associated certificates. We are also giving the associated expiration date so that you can find out that the URL that the certificate that is associated with this URL is expired or not. If expired, there could be a potential threat. And down below you see projects. Any idea what is projects?
Probably some data which is like inside of my state, like for example, some pieces of infrastructure, right? Which somehow to the system. Like something to, as per logic, something which belongs to me. Somehow I can relate to how it relates with my
Close. So what I can do here is that if there is bbcnewsagency.com or any IP address or any SSL certificate hash or anything, I can add it to a project here, and then you can add multiple artifacts to a project, and then once added to a project, your threat intelligence teams could look at that particular project in isolation.
It's a threat project then?
Yeah, you can name it so. Or your research teams could look at a project that way. It's a means of collaboration. And your projects are also available here, by the way. So you can see team projects, my projects, shared projects, and so on. This one, for example, APT34 updated arsenal, it has 13 artifacts. Artifacts could be anything, IP addresses, certificates, blah, blah, blah. Created by date, and you can also assign tags. You can also delete a project. You can also download a project and then export it somewhere else, and so on. Now, taking a step back, right now what we saw is summary. If I go to data, you can see here, I am getting a full-blown information on who is this guy, what are the records, what is the email address associated, what is the certificate associated, what are the subdomains associated, and so on. Let me show you one. So, cookies. These are the associated cookies with this URL. So, you can see that there are also cookies pointing to Twitter, Google, and so on. You can see the first scene, last scene. So, in case we don't have any information, it defaults to 1/1/1970. It doesn't mean it was last seen in 1970. Likewise, we have a lot of DNS related information. So you can see the values here, the first scene, last scene, the types, and the tags that you may want to assign. Articles, we all navigated from the article, so of course it's going to show the same article. My personal favorite, and what's most interesting, is this. So Intel profiles. Keep in mind that this is a demo environment, so you will only see some fabricated information, but you can see threat actors, their profiles, the sponsored states, the targets, and Defender TI indicators. Right? You can see all of these here. And then there are tools. So Cobalt Strike, I think we are all familiar with the ways Cobalt Strike has been used in.
How do you get information about sponsor states?
This is all dummy information right now. This is all dummy information that you're seeing right now. The sponsored state, that is not derived from Microsoft reaching out to any political groups. It's something derived from publicly published articles. Or if we get any information on deep web, dark web that's out there in the world, then we bring it into our repository. Yeah? It's not assumption. It's something that is out there, published in the market. Already published news that's verified, that comes here. And also, sorry?
Verified by whom?
That's what I'm coming to. So verified by whom? You remember I showed you on the slides the bunch of Microsoft Threat Intel people who are sitting behind the solution, who are validating this stuff. Right? So it's human intelligence, it's not artificial intelligence at this level, because we cannot rely on machine to tell us that, guys, this is the nation state behind this threat actor. So there is a full team of Microsoft Threat Intel providers who are doing this analysis based on published information. No assumptions, no accusations, nothing.
This is basically an automated version of the CIA, because they do a similar pattern, but they used to do that in the 70s in the same way. You had thousands and thousands of people, and FSB or other countries used to use similar approaches. This is actually a very smart, semi-automated way of...
I was about to say the same, that it's not automated, it's semi-automated. Rather, I would still put it in the category of manual, but it's arguable.
Yeah, the research that used to happen manually is automated, but the decision-making process, I don't think it's much changed based on at least what I know from and read from the 80s.
Yeah, and then we are also showing the threat the toolkits that the threat actor would use, and also some specific backdoors, for example. So depending on your organization or depending on a real environment, this is just a demo environment. It is only showing shadow pad right now, but it could populate with a bunch of other backdoors.
Yeah, so coming back to what nation sponsored it, it's kind of right that it's an assumption. It's because everything we do is we make an assumption based on some information. So in that case, that's an assumption, but it's a verifiable assumption.
It is verifiable piece of information,
because
and
you can trace back based on what that assumption was made.
Exactly. Right? It's traceable, it's verifiable, or at times you know that certain nation states also take responsibility. They come out in the news and they take the responsibility. Yeah. And that's why I said it could also be based on published articles.
So a published article was in China saying, yes, that was us.
Yes, but again, human beings sitting there who know that published article is not coming from a news reporter, but from the horse's mouth. that they are themselves claiming responsibility.
Yeah.
So
Of course, you always need to take it a little bit with a grain of salt,
Yeah.
because of course there are threat actors that will claim it was me when it was actually not them, but they just want to get the reputation of that, right? Or I don't know, patterns of when people are usually working, is that in line with the working hours of that particular nation? But of course, that also is something that could be faked if you would want to. I don't know, using comments in the code that is in a certain language. I mean, there are many ways to track it, but there are also many ways to fault those tracks. So it's always with a grain of salt at the end of the day.
A little bit of an extension question on that. Why does it matter in a threat intelligence which nation sponsored it? I mean, for the CIA, stuff like that's obvious. But
may or may not. May or may not.
But sponsor state is not necessarily government, or it's always government.
No. Well, by the English language terminology, it's all.
It's not necessarily government.
Yeah, but it's as far as the tool is concerned, it could be an individual who's doing it. So it's not always governments.
So actually, the term state and the demo combination makes it a bit skewed, because there could have been Jeff's demo, basically.
Exactly. So it's not always government.
Yeah, sorry, it was me. It was
So that was a small glimpse of the tool that we could show. It's just the tip of the iceberg. We have a lot more to talk about when it comes to threat intel and how it works. But for now, also for the sake of time, we will summarize and take any other questions. So over to Sarah.
To summarize, we just have 4 items. Threat intelligence is enriched information. It is actionable information. Hopefully it will give you also a set of recommendations that you can take right away, that you know what to do based on reading the report that you have. And you should use threat intelligence to understand your adversaries, to understand what are your own high-risk assets, and make informed decisions on which security controls to implement, ways to defend against it, and also, of course, being informed of how the attack landscape keeps evolving and keeps emerging, to be up to date on everything that is happening in that space. So if we got you curious, we have a goodie. So you can have a trial license for Microsoft Defender for Threat Intelligence for free for 30 days. We have a sign-up link in the slides. And in addition to the Microsoft Defender for Threat Intelligence solution, we also launched the Microsoft Defender External Attack Surface Management solution, which is also something we would recommend you to have a look at. That's for a different session.
Yeah. So the way MDTI, or Defender Threat Intelligence, gives you a perspective into an adversary that is sitting outside. So it gives you an inside-out view. Same way, Defender External Attack Surface Management gives you an outside-in perspective. So it tells you what all surfaces of your organization are actually exposed to the internet and how vulnerable they are. So they go hand in hand, but one is from an inside-out view, the other one is outside-in view.
So one of them is red team.
Yeah, it depends how you look at it. Well, yeah. And both these solutions are getting traction from our advanced customers, but the 30-day trial is available for both the solutions. MDESM and Microsoft is, they just always come up with acronyms, or we always come with acronyms. So MDESM is also available for 30 days, but it is on the Azure portal, which means it's a consumption-based solution. And Defender Threat Intelligence, just like your E5 stack or M365 Defender stack, it has its own URL, it resides in your own tenant. So that's the difference. One is built, the other one is consumption-based. Yeah?
I suspect MDESM will be rebranded.
Yeah.
But also these solutions are both very new. Like they've both been launched just a couple of months ago. So also we do expect some changes coming along the way.
Yeah. So they were launched in October when we had our annual event, Ignite. And we are working on improving them. A lot is changing. We are building APIs, building better integrations, improving our detections, improving our logics, and so on. Yeah. Okay. So with that, even though we took questions hand in hand, we are happy to answer any other questions.
With regards to the team is here right now. We're all part of a cloud team, and any customer or other team that comes to us, they're always like, "Oh, you do cloud, so you know about data and you know about security in cloud because you know everything to do with cloud, right?" And obviously that's not true. Some of us are specialized in DevOps, and some of us are specialized in data, etc. When you talk about the field of threat intelligence, and let's say that I'm trying to build up a team of people who are specialized in this, would you say that you also have a field where you know threat intelligence, so you know everything about it, or would you say that there are like sub-specializations, and we need to find people who cover, like some people handle horizontal products and threat intelligence related to that, some people handle threat intelligence at an industry level? Is there such kind of a, you just know everything?
We don't claim that we know everything, but we are not, we are industry agnostic. So Defender Threat Intelligence is not only for banking industry or not only for...
I mean, like if I were to be trying to pull a team together based on threat intelligence and take yourselves as examples, would you say that every type of threat intelligence specialist knows?
We have sub-specializations.
Yeah, exactly.
At Microsoft, you mean?
Yes.
Well, in general, of course, if you look at the threat intelligence field and in a threat intelligence team, first of all, it depends how big the team is. If it's just a one-man team, yeah, you're gonna have to know it all. But of course, every team has certain specialization in that team. A certain person might be more familiar with a certain adversary, where another person is very good in determining.
Do you have those, sorry to interrupt, but do you have those specializations standardized? Because I think that's the question.
Oh, standardized.
I'm going to ask that question when I'm in Israel next week with the product group. I'll raise that.
Because from a role perspective, because when we have a team, we kind of, it's not very formally, but it is like IT industry standardized. We have certain types of people, not exactly roles, and together we cover a certain extent of cloud. So the interesting question about your field is your field similarly, that maybe you are already like progressed towards roles, or maybe you have a type of person based on the explanation you just gave, which I interrupted, I'm sorry.
No. So we should actually raise this question internally, that those 8,300 plus people who are actually looking at things in the background, how are they categorized or what are their specializations, would be a good learning for us as well. Yeah.
So once you're back from Israel, I'll look you up in the office and I'll ask.
We'll say hi.
Super.
Okay. Anybody else? No?
Yeah,
Good.
Some kind of question which I'm still formulating in my brain. It's more related to how we apply the solution. For example, let's assume my usage of Microsoft services is very limited, but I also use other clouds and premises systems, so on and so forth. But I'm not dependent from Microsoft Suite of like Office 365 at all. I use Google Suite. How convenient this solution would be for me? Because other solutions which are presented on the market, they're covering all the providers.
Good question. Yeah.
How useful Defender would be if I cut it from Microsoft technology?
In the upcoming few months, and this is already a roadmap item, to make it agnostic of XDR solutions and SIEM solutions, because even in the slide that we showed earlier, we simply said that it can feed into XDR or SIEM solutions. Yes, the integrations will come with Sentinel first, because it's easier for us to build, but the end goal is to build it with all the other SIEM solutions. The way we work with DevOps or Defender for DevOps or Defender for containers is also the same way. With Defender for DevOps, we work with Azure DevOps, of course, because it's easy. We also work with GitHub. We are also going to launch integrations with GitLab and other third-party repositories, so to say. So we are not going to limit ourselves to Microsoft Suite and call ourselves native and then play on that card. We are definitely going to increase our integrations. But that's all in the pipeline.
Currently, you are more Microsoft stack native rather than to all other products.
No, we will not stick to Microsoft in the future.
Not stick in future, but for this very moment, you are more
in fact,
for Microsoft stack.
In fact, even in this moment, as I speak, we are building the API integrations in the background so that we can feed data into SIEM solutions and XDR solutions, because we just launched this 2 months back. And we are still collecting feedback from the field. So all the integrations will first come with Microsoft and then others. So yeah, sure. We don't want to be the last man standing in between you and your drinks. So if there are no other questions, thank you.